Hello viewers, welcome to Beyond the Bites. It's the beginning of another year which has been ushered in with similar kind of quote-unquote celebrations, noisy parties, late-night celebrations, lots of activities on the streets. What comes along with these so-called celebrations is also a number of drunk driving cases, at times hooliganism on the streets, and even worse, hit and runs. Well, have our New Year celebrations been reduced to drunken evenings spent with friends and family, or is there still a lot more to it? Is anything wrong at all, rather, with the way things are right now? Is this not a celebration meaningful enough, or who cares if they're meaningful or not, as long as you are having a good time with your family and friends? Lot of questions, lot of answers. We'll talk about this with our select group of panelists today who have come from different, who come from different backgrounds. I have with me Mr. Avinav Barbara, student, young student, political thinker, somebody who loves to travel, see the world, and believes in good-natured fun. Welcome, Avinav, to this episode of Beyond the Bites. I also have with me Mr. Brigu Talukdar, guest faculty Zamia. Welcome, Brigu, to the show. To my right is Dr. Sabrina Iqbal Sarkar from the Department of Political Science, Cotton University. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Iqbal. And of course, I also have with me Mr. Ranjan Barua, a student counselor, career mentor. Welcome, Ranjan, to the show. Avinav, I will come straight to you. Well, none of us are alien to the kind of celebrations we have been witness to in New Year's for the last decade and a half. What is your view of such celebrations? I mean, I'm sure all of us are having a lot of fun.
Nabrun, I'll come to your question in a moment, but first of all, I would like to wish a very happy new year to all the panelists and all our viewers who are watching the show. 2019 promises to be a year full of a lot of important events. We have the upcoming general elections. We also have an impending citizenship bill, and also will be seeing the completion of the NRC process. So in the light of these events, I would like to hope, pray, and wish that the people of Assam come out of 2019 on a successful and on a victorious note. Now, to come to your question, Nabarun, I would like to concede the point that you're making here today. Because over the last few years, if we see, New Year celebrations have become characterized by ostentatious forms of celebrations which are marked by grand extravagance and a mindless form of consumerism. And what is more problematic is that most of these forms of celebrations remain largely insensitive to the real struggles that the people are facing right as we speak. Because I would like to point out certain cases. As we have been celebrating these festivities, there have been those miners who are still trapped in those mines in Meghalaya. The women's movement is facing a big hurdle against organized religion in Kerala, and at the same time, the agrarian crisis is at a very worst position, and it is driving farmers to a point of existential crisis. In such a circumstance, I find that these ostentatious forms of celebrations that we are seeing are largely insensitive to the real struggles that we are facing as a nation as of now.
Well, Abhinav, point taken. But Brigu Talukdar, we are a democracy. We pretend to be a free society, or we are rather a free society. Of course, we are worried about the miners. We are sad about a lot of things around, but we have the right to celebrate, don't we, Brigu?
Yeah. People need something to celebrate, at least. For the life that we lead today is very cutthroat. It's very mundane. So any chance or opportunity where you want to get a celebrate, so supposedly the idea of a new year, where people want to break free. And okay, celebration is well and good, but coming to your point that whether it has been reduced to simple drunken parties or something, but I guess it's both. There are a section of people who are indulging in such, I would say, use the word very insensitive partying, who you don't look who is around you, and you don't bother. As long as you are having a good time, you don't bother what is going on around you. But at the same time, there are families and friends who are sitting together in a winter near a bonfire and celebrating a new year. So celebration, of course, keeping in mind whatever is going on, celebrations are important, but at the same time, celebrations have to be kept in mind what their surroundings are.
Again, I'll put a similar question to you, Dr. Iqbal. Are our celebrations defined by somebody else, or the commercial establishments, or the marketing agencies, or the social media? Is this what's happening, or this has been a trend and this is how it has been for years now? So what's the problem with that?
No, I think there has been a distinct paradigm shift when it comes to New Year celebrations in the light of two developments. One is consumerism and one is the coming in of social media. So what happens, you know, now a lot of people, the masses, indulge in certain things only because they want to show them off on social media. So it becomes a little, you know, difficult to actually judge whether they're actually doing it for themselves or to actually post it on social media as a kind of status symbol or something. First point. And I think the problem with New Year celebrations going out of hand, becoming issues of drunken driving and recklessness is basically because they have become very, very insensitive to the issues of public order and encroaching on the liberty of others. Celebrations are fine, all right, but what happens is that we cannot be so insensitive that my celebration should not become a, you know, problem for my neighbor. That is one point.
Absolutely.
And I just think that we have to become a little more sensitive when it comes to such celebrations.
Ranjan, do we have a problem at hand as far as, you know, New Year celebrations is concerned? I mean, this is the first thing we are discussing after the New Year, but do we have a problem at hand, or it's fine, you know, let people have fun once a year? What's wrong with that? Maybe the neighbor can compromise for that night. Well, I mean, that's what the general view also is.
Right. But see, we are talking about celebration. Now, New Year, and then when you come and talk from Assam's perspective, we have another event coming up. Basically, when we are young, we are more focusing during 13 January or 14. That's like what we call Uruka, or it's a get together and we come together, family members, friends, people in villages, everywhere. But now, yes, things have changed because when it comes to celebration, of course, definition will be different for different people. Some people might need it as social media, someone might need a show-off kind of thing. Some people might want to do it because they have nothing else to do. But thing is that, see, there are differences in cities, differences in urban areas, and still differences in the village and rural areas. So the problem is we see or we discuss these things because these things are captured in the media. Things which come on television screen. Now at the same time, like when 31st night or like Fajr or 31st night, mostly people go around even after 12 for everything. So they'll have lots of noise, party. I agree. That happens in areas where people can buy and afford those things. These things were not there when I suppose if you ask me about my old days, I mean like when I was kid, we had because few vehicles, few motorbikes, so options were limited. So maybe, but yes, trends has changed, but now we cannot say directly whether it has changed for good or bad. There are both sides, but I say that yes, when we define celebration, it's different in cities, it's different in suburban areas, and it's different in rural areas. So you have to look at different things. We cannot only look at one particular city, or you cannot look at only few people and discuss it as a problem for everyone. That I see.
I would like to say one thing. Actually, is that we don't want to become judgmental that whether people should celebrate or not.
Yeah.
And also, I think that every person individually has the right to celebrate whatever he or she wishes to celebrate. But what we are talking about here is that any kind of celebration should be sensitive to the neighbors and to other people and their needs and wants. Because, you know, a lot of families, they have people who are a little old, elderly people, they have children. So we can't have loud parties in residential areas. Another thing is that people have become very, very, careless, or they do not even concern about orders issued by the judiciary when, you know, there is a limit set to parties being shut down at a particular time. People do not care about that. So I think that is a major problem with the society that we are living in, that we don't care about law.
Do you think crossing the line has become a trend in our country because everybody else does it, so let it be?
No, actually, if you see, a certain kind of an aesthetic value has come to be attached with these forms of celebrations, whereby a nexus has grown whereby celebration is being equated with irresponsible behavior. And like my co-panelists have said, the mass media or the popular channels have also been largely responsible for disseminating such a kind of a value system, whereby we believe that doing certain things is the proper way of celebrating. And for example, I would also look at, I'll also cite examples, like some of the most widely viewed movies, English movies in India, are the Hangover series, Hangover Part 1, 2, 3, Bad Moms, and other such movies. And these are the movies that people watch so widely. And if you look at the central theme of these movies are all about getting drunk and then going haywire. So it is such values and such an aesthetic that has come to be attached with certain modes of celebrations which are at the end of the day equated with irresponsible behavior. And what has happened is that a false consciousness has got created, whereby we believe that doing certain things in a wild way, in a careless way, is the actual ideal of having fun. That is the problem, I guess. It is this false consciousness.
I have something to say. You know, actually what happens is that basically we don't want to decipher an image that, you know, drinking is bad. Because drinking is not bad. A lot of, you know, it's a social
good or
activity.
bad, the law allows it.
Yeah.
Yes,
good or
yes.
bad, the law allows it.
Yeah, and we are nobody to judge. We are nobody to judge whether it is good or bad.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is that, you know, when people indulge in certain behavior after getting drunk, that becomes a matter of social responsibility.
Exactly. Drinking is
idea
not
of
bad. The
nuisance.
irresponsibility that is associated with these drinking habits.
Yeah.
For example, if you look at the statistics that have been released by the police department, on the 31st and 1st itself, there were 413 cases of drunk driving reported. And if you even look at the statistics for the last 15 days in the run-up to the New Year celebration, there were 813 cases of drunk driving. Now, I think these are big figures. And
Is it even practically possible to tackle drunk driving on such occasions?
No.
It's not possible.
Is it even practically possible?
It's not possible. It's because the certain idea that you have equated partying to drinking. That's
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
The idea of
You
being
should have
partying
certain
is
penalty
drinking.
to it. You should have a strict penalty, and police should not have any compromise. Then only,
Which is there
otherwise,
in place,
general,
which is there in place. But the penalty doesn't take away the fact that you know that drunk driving can result in somebody's death, cause injury to someone. The risk still remains, penalty or no penalty. So how are we looking to tackle these kind of things? We cannot tell people that don't enjoy, don't go out, or you know, don't have a good time out. Everybody does it. So what could be the way forward? Probably more regulations, probably
A sense of awareness has to be there. That celebrate, but celebrate responsibly. You know,
I think, you know, it's not about more regulations because we have enough regulations. I think there's a culture in the Asian societies basically that we are not really concerned about obeying law. You know, I have a major problem that smoking is banned in public places. Everywhere you go, people are smoking. You know, seat belt is mandatory, but people hardly use seat belts. So there's a problem about abiding with law. People do not abide by law. And that culture needs to be developed because the court is coming in, the judiciary is giving in decisions, the judiciary is trying to maintain public order. But the society, the civil society has a major role to conform to those decisions in order to maintain public order.
There is already a baggage full of regulations in place. I think what is more important, like my panelists have said, is to sensitize the people. And I think here I would also have to appreciate the role played by our DCP, who has been going and reaching out to the media and trying to sensitize the people that you can drink, but then don't drive, use a sober driver to drive along with you. And at the same time, I think this value system that has got created around celebrations and drinking, that has to be changed. And how to change it, what we'll have to do is that we'll have to emphasize upon alternate forms of celebrations, alternate value systems associated with celebrations. Like for example, there we are talking here about wild partying and brawls and everything, but at the same time, I want to emphasize that there were a section of people who celebrated the first day of the year by donating and distributing blankets to the needy. There was a poetry recital competition organized on the banks of the Digholi Pukhuri. And at the same time, there were many young boys and girls who went out of their homes to clean the banks of the Brahmaputra. So these were the ways through which these people wanted to celebrate the first day of the year. And I think these alternate traditions of celebration should be counterposed to the dominant tendency that is now in the way of becoming hegemonical in the name of New Year celebrations.
Actually, I think the problem, Abhinav, is that, you know, there's a major tendency among the Asian masses to ape the West.
Exactly.
All right. And so what happens is that obviously alternative forms of celebrations can be encouraged, but they cannot be imposed. That is the issue. You can obviously suggest it to people, but we cannot impose or we cannot force them to take them up. So I think what can be done is that a little more, you know, awareness on the part of the authorities and the civil society, because the parents, when you had said about the cases of drunken driving, I think a majority of the cases takes place when the drivers are young or underage.
Even teenagers.
Yeah, the teenagers or they are underage drivers, and without proper monitoring, they are, you know, riding vehicles, getting drunk, and that is when the accidents happen. Recklessness on the part of the younger generation is responsible for a major part of these kind of accidents.
And also, like, let us not limit this drunkenness to only the New Year parties, because there is a growing festivities are associated.
Absolutely.
Picnic parties, etc., etc. You'll find that the alcohol is seeped through these old traditions.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all about, again, coming back to money and advertisement. See, but
But
all this.
are we a nation? Are we a nation? Are we a society too hassled by what's going on around that we just want to take a break from all the stress? And this is what we choose because this is what we find the easy way out. Has that also a role
alcohol
to play?
cannot be all
Because I'll tell you why. It would be a farce to say only those who can afford or only it's for the rich. Partying is for the rich. The menace. When you're talking about the menace created on New Year's Eve on the 31st night, it goes cutting across
Classes.
Yeah. So it would be a myth if we say only a certain section of the people.
But then the mode of celebration that we are talking about, we'll also have to see that this form of celebration is largely becoming hegemonical. Even amongst the classes who are unable to access this conspicuous forms of celebration, it is not that these people do not aspire for those celebrations. So if you see even amongst those classes, you won't find a principled opposition to the kind of celebrations that we are critiquing out here. Rather, you'd find that if you look at their personal celebrations, only the scale is different. But if you look at the essence of their celebration, those celebrations are largely same, embedded in a tradition of material culture and narcissism. So it's not that there is a class differential. What I am saying is that this hegemonic tendency of a particular form of celebration is seeping across class boundaries. So that is why it's a cultural critique. We'll have to deal with this problem by positing an alternative tradition, by positing an alternative culture of celebration. I think that is what is essential.
But I think, you know, the issue at hand is that, you know, this hegemonical tendency that you're talking about, it is not common to Asian societies only. It is there all across the world, like largely. So it is very difficult to cut against it.
Is an Anglo-Saxon form of celebration, is an Anglo-Saxon form of value systems.
Yes,
so
but the problem is that it has already seeped in. It has already seeped in.
I don't think we are forced not to launch a critique against it. A critique not through regulations, but a critique through intellectual discourses, through discussions like Navarun is organizing here today. So I think these are
We'll talk more about this, but right now, if to take a very short break, don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Bites. We're discussing the New Year celebrations. Has the celebrations being done in a particular way, which has created a lot of disturbance for the neighbors. In fact, Dr. Iqbal, you have made this point. Celebrations do not give us a license to disturb our neighbors, to ruin everybody's sleep. But that is what has been happening over the years. There's little or no concern about the problem faced by others during this. And this has kind of seeped into our culture somehow. How to change these things? Laws are already there. Nobody is following.
Yes, that is the problem, you know, and I think like we have been talking about the problems created by these kind of celebrations. Drunken driving and drunkenness is one of them. And I think, you know, two other problems that I would like to highlight on this platform is that loud music, loud noise without any kind of sensitiveness to the people living in and around the area. And another one is that, you know, during and around the time of New Year's, you will see that there are a lot of picnic parties which happen. People go for picnics and then they go to these pristine environmental conditions and then they will, you know, when they come back, it's all dirty with waste and garbage, and they do not even care about that. So that is something which rapidly needs to change because, you know, we in the Northeast are somewhat successful in maintaining the greenery of the state, the greenery of the region. But increasingly during the time of New Year's, you will see, you go to Borapani, you go to Rani, everywhere there is waste. You know, and this is also, I think, a major problem with the partying culture that we are talking and discussing here. Because even on picnics, you will see that people are playing loud music and drinking and eating all kinds of snacks and disposing the waste just right out there. You know, being a teacher, whenever I'm talking to my students about the environment, I always make a point that what is the point if you are reading about the environment and then throwing stuff around and an uneducated person is coming and picking them up? It's not enough to just study about the environment in class. You have to actually practice protecting and promoting environmental concerns. And like you said about the issue about loud music and loud behavior during New Year's, this is something which is very, very delicate, a topic which cannot be, you know, I cannot give you a concrete solution to it because, you know, what happens is that if I want my neighbor to be lesser in terms of loudness, I have to go in and say that please, you know.
So as a society, is it about can you call it lack of humility that is around? It's all, does it all get about ego and, you know, scoring 1 point over the other? I mean, is that how we are heading?
We are becoming characterized by a sense of brazenness as a society. There is a brazenness whereby the very community values are deteriorating, and society is all about showing off to your neighbor how loud your celebration is, because celebration is also equated with how high your social status is. I think those are the problems. It is the materialistic values which have seeped into our very consciousness, and whereby we feel that the more loud our celebrations is, the more prosperous our family status is. So that is why even if you look at the places that we like to frequent, it's not that we like to have a simple celebration. We'd always like to go to loud, upscale places, because after that, the social media would help us demonstrating our social status. So I think these are problems. These are problems.
So the idea of celebration, right, as what he has said, is what exactly does celebration mean? So we have to really understand that how people, you know, celebration as a thing is that you are celebrating something you've reached somewhere. So there will always be a natural tendency that we want to show it off or something. But when it reaches a certain, crosses a certain line, when we lack the basic human compassion, that if I'm drinking, if I'm, let's for that matter take the drunken driving cases. I'm drunk or somebody is drunk. He forgets the place that if I'm driving rashly, because of me, some other person might feel the problem. You normally will see that the person who is drunk and driving, he will get through, but people behind, they will face a lot of problems who are in a sober state. So there is this basic sense, lack of understanding as to what our actions affect our environment.
Exactly in this context, you know, Navarun, I would like to make a point, you know, because I have the background of political science here. I would like to bring in a theoretical lens to analyze the problem. You know, G.S. Mill, one of the most prominent political thinkers, you know, he talks about liberty, and in this context, he talks about two kinds of actions, self-regarding and other-regarding. Now, self-regarding are, of course, those actions which concern only you. So you have the liberty to do whatever you please in that context. But when it comes to other regarding actions, you have to take into consideration how my actions are affecting the others. And this is a very basic thing which I do not even think needs to be socialized deliberately to a person. But people lack this basic consciousness that if I am driving rashly, somebody else is facing a problem. If I am playing loud music, somebody else is facing a problem. This basic common sense is lacking in people, which is very, very surprising, because we are supposed to be progressing as a society and a civilization, but we are going down on common sense. You know, nobody cares.
Is it because I am more concerned about missing out on the festivities and celebrations than even thinking about these things? Has commercialization brought it to that point?
See,
whereby I am compelled. I am compelled to celebrate.
Yeah, when we're talking about common sense of awareness, it's not that person is not aware. Anyone after drinking and driving, he knows something, either I might make mistake or someone else might make mistake. The problem with us is taking action. Awareness level, suppose we are going to picnic party, something, we know we should not make it that anywhere. But still, the only most crucial problem is we do not avoid and we do not take up action. See, when suppose if I am making a loud noise somewhere, I am getting disturbed, someone else might be. So the problem is, and now the important thing is celebration. Whether I want to celebrate or someone else want to celebrate and want me to participate. So like what we said about the commercialization. So like earlier days, this celebration get together were more where everyone is to contribute, whatever they can. It's not that you have to only give money. You can give material, some give rice, whatever. So that kind of celebration was truly in a teamwork where celebration was happening nicely. But now commercialization, yes, because now if you look at the metros and all, look at the places where this loud music and all these things, and wherever there will be some supporters, some sponsors, all these things come. So somewhere the things of my celebration is someone is trying to, you know, invite me or taking me to somewhere where they have certain agenda. So what I see is that if celebration is not from my, like we're talking about civil society and participation, no? If it is not from me within, then if I'm joining someone else, of course the celebration will be somewhere else. It cannot be a true celebration.
I have something to say. Basically, I think, you know, the root of all these problems broadly or largely can be pulled down to the fact that we are now manifesting and nurturing a very individualistic culture. We are only concerned about society. The communal consciousness is largely lacking. We do not care about the larger community. I am only concerned about my happiness, my well-being. So we become very hedonistic. My pleasure is primary and I do not care about the pleasure of those around me, you know. So that is, I think, a major problem why these kind of problems manifest.
And also the idea of what is accepted, like like the acceptability, or
Absolutely.
you want to get
Absolutely.
accepted in certain. For
Absolutely.
example, we use the word peer pressure in schools, but at the same time in society also there is a huge peer pressure that if that family is celebrating this way, I must also show it up at the same time.
And
Is it the fear of being left out that we often have in
yes,
society?
in a way, exactly. Because, you know, I think there is an implicit patronizing of such kind of celebrations, because you will see all the big hotels and restaurants, they will have these huge New Year bashes and New Year parties, and there'll be costly passes and costly entry fees, you know. And what happens, those people who can't make it to these celebrations, they try to, you know, justify or substitute for those celebrations at their own places in their own ways. And that is when it manifests into such kind of events, which becomes, you know, a public nuisance for that matter. So I think this implicit patronizing and the homogenization of so-called New Year celebrations needs to be stopped. Because, you know, a lot of people ask me, where are you partying at New Year's? I may not be partying at all. I might be at home, and that might be party for me enough. You know?
And the question of acceptability and getting left out, the fear of getting left out, I think I would like to invoke a phrase by Marx. I think these celebrations, what is happening is that they have acquired a life on their own, whereby these celebrations are looked at as if something very natural. They are looked at just like we look at seasons. We are looking at these celebrations as just like we are looking at a Durga Puja celebration or a Saraswati Puja celebration, whereby one of my cousin who comes to me and says, what are you doing? And I say that I am not doing anything. Then his reply is that if you stay sober, or if your celebrations are sober, then your entire year would go sober. So what is happening is that we are attaching a certain kind of naturalness to these celebrations. We are attaching a certain kind of sanctity and spirituality to these celebrations. And I think we forget in the process that these celebrations, or this New Year itself, is a very artificial construct, a construct that has been brought about just by the Gregorian calendar. We seem to forget about the artificialness of this.
Because it's not culturally rooted in our own cultures at all.
Absolutely. It's something that you have aped over the years, and probably that's
and have
why
become natural now.
Because if you see that even if we have got Magh Bihu, as my fellow panelists mentioned, or other celebrations, there is a certain ritualist which are very, in a way, it's also keeping in checks and balances. There are checks and balances.
It's regulated.
It's socially, they are regulated, but it's not socially regulated at all. It's like like a hunting season, free season. You go and you do whatever you want.
Actually, the universalization of New Year celebrations, I think, is the problem. You know, because it has been universalized to such an extent that cultural relativism has no place here. Exactly. You know, people are not concerned what culture they belong to. They are more interested in actually manifesting that universalization, that universalism associated
we have
with New Year
internalized the value system associated with such celebrations, and that is why we feel left out, and we feel that we are committing a bad omen, even if we are not celebrating. I think that is the problem.
Probably there's nothing wrong with universalization of any celebration, as long as we do not allow somebody to define and redefine them year after year for us, month after month, according to their needs.
Correct. Now everyone has right to celebrate. Only thing is that, again, the same thing, action, knowing it, and then the way I do it. It's we have to somewhere few people needs to, and then again, of course, because then whatever celebrations are taking place, what comes on again and for larger picture. So like few televisions or few channels we have, whatever we see, that also makes impact.
Exactly.
Because there's some certain people who are supposed somewhere who are not doing it. So it's not only like partying. Again, the people who are also supposed, like the hotels they are organizing, but at the same time who are showing it on their screen, that affects directly or indirectly each and every one of us.
So the universalization of a celebration, or the very fact that we are partying, like we have all agreed, it's not the problem. The problem is the irresponsible behavior that has come to attach with certain modes of celebration. I think that is the problem, and that is what we should discuss.
Yes, public order cannot afford to be disturbed. That is the problem at hand. We cannot have a celebration disrupt public order at any level, to any degree. Exactly. That needs to be monitored.
And like my friend has said, it's not only about New Year's. I think even during Bihu, during Diwali, during the Durga Puja, every time you see that there is a celebration and there is a transgression of responsibility. I think that is where the problem lies. Why are
Is it also because, see, there's a difference between a Bihu, a Diwali, a Durga Puja and a New Year celebrations. I'll tell you why. Because a New Year celebrations have become personalized. You know, everybody is celebrating in their own personal capacity, own personal way, in whatever location. If you see across the globe, there's a trend of people coming together at a city center, near a clock tower, near some spot, legendary spot, to come together and celebrate as a city. That thing, of course, that culture is, of course, lacking in India. That has never happened. Is this one of the prime reasons why things have gone haywire over the years? Because it has not exactly, we may pretend it's a public celebration, but it has not turned up to be so over the years. We have failed. Even when we have tried, things have gone awfully wrong. There have been cases in Bangalore a few years back where, you know, girls have been molested in New Year celebrations on New Year's Eve. And as a nation, we could not evolve to that culture, which shows that we have been aping the West, but couldn't really do it well.
So we have a quick thing of copying something. Yeah. So we have, that's true, and these things, like if you look at 30 years back or maybe 40, it's very, very new, very, very young, still in a young stage. So while copying, and maybe we'll take some time to cope up with that, how to, you know, tackle the solution.
It's not about copying, it's about, you know,
I think, you know, the issue is that there are distinct civilizational distinctions between the West and, you know, the other cultures, be it the Orient or be it the Asian culture. And I think the problems which arise, you know, is because there are distinct civilizational distinctions. That is why when we try to ape something from the West, we are not able to do it at the level at which they do it. And also because we lack at varying degrees and varying points of that society. For example, the educational levels are terribly low. We have a large chunk of rural and suburban population. And, you know, when these people come into the city, they try to ape the city culture. And sometimes, you know, they are a little confused and they do things in a, you know, haste or confused state of mind, and that sometimes may manifest into, you know, something unacceptable. As far as girls being molested is concerned, and, you know, I think that is I would term that as collateral damage, because wherever there is any kind of event, there is some kind of molestation happening. That is a different debate altogether, which we can indulge in, you know, but I just think that the problems which arise out of such celebrations is the fact that, like I've already stated, a very individualistic orientation is taking place, you know, and communal consciousness is slowly moving away. Also, I think another issue when it comes to aping celebrations or other mannerisms of the West is concerned, we are gradually moving away from our native cultures. Now, be it Diwali or be it Bihu, it is always Hindi songs, you know, or it is English songs. So if it is
that's
Bihu,
again debatable.
you know, yes, again, if it is Bihu, then, you know, it has to be specifically culture-centric, I believe. So, you know, that is a problem, is we cannot put a closure to this issue, because there are so many levels of problems here. It becomes very difficult to come to one point and say that this needs to be done to, you know, wrap it up.
See, probably we cannot regulate everything. Probably we cannot say this needs to be done there. Of course, the society will evolve in its own way. That's why all we can do probably is to make the society aware so that they move ahead in the right direction. But again, coming to it, because we have failed to make New Year celebrations or mass celebrations in the country, is that the reason for all the chaos that we face? Would you see that as the reason?
Firstly, I won't think the New Year celebrations, at least in the urban centers, have not been a mass phenomenon. Every other person is concerned about celebrating New Year. And at the same time, if you look at the rural areas, the very fact that these people are not so interested in indulging in the celebrations, I think that represents a positive counterpoint to the hegemonical tendency that we are seeing. So these people who are not celebrating it as yet, I would like to place my bets on them, because I think that is the cultural reservoir that will act as the contradistinction to the hegemonic tendency that is now gripping all of us in these urban centers.
Or maybe like, I'd just like to extend this point as the idea of a community coming together. Like it's a community event where you celebrate.
Absolutely.
I guess also the point of here, what we are missing out, one point is that the New Year celebration which you're trying to ape or we're trying to copy is basically part of the holiday season in the West, which is basically stems from the Christmas till the first week of January. It's a whole holiday season, and New Year is not something that is very different. It comes in the same time. But in India, what it has done is that it has the New Year, the only part the New Year has come, because Christmas doesn't have that presence here. Of course, people celebrate, but it doesn't have that sort of presence. Number two, and the way that Christmas and New Year gets celebrated in a community-wise, or it's like that people visit each other there, or it's like coming together. It's not 50, 60 people coming together. It's like hundreds of people coming together.
It's culturally ingrained. It's a community thing.
Yes. I would like to point out a small nuances in this issue that we're discussing here today. I think, what happens is that whenever we talk about celebrations in this part of the country, we are only talking or thinking in context of young people. Something which I've observed in this part of the region is that there's a very large absence of older or elderly people from the public space.
That's a very good point you've made. Yes.
We see that older and elderly people are not seen to, frequent public spaces or restaurants. When I'm down south, India itself, in Chennai, I see that a lot of old people, they come up with their families and they have a good time. But in this part of the country, we have seen that older people are not seen in the public spaces. It is only the younger people who are quote-unquote partying. So, partying is something which can have different kinds of meanings for different kinds of people. And obviously, all sections of population should be incorporated. Why I'm bringing this point up, because if we have people of all ages in a celebration, then I believe the intensity of the celebration will remain right. Because, there will be people to kind of monitor which way the celebration should progress, or at least tell the younger people who might be misguided that you should do this or you should not do this. So it would be better to do this or not good to do this.
I think what Professor Sabrina has said, I think that's agreeable. But at the same time, I don't think that's possible to do it overnight, because we'll have to look into the socio-economic dynamics.
We will take your point after a very short break. Don't go anywhere. A very short break here. Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Bites. We're discussing the New Year celebrations in the country. Is all well with the celebrations, or there's of course a room for improvement? Avinav, you were making a point just before going ahead in the break as far as the presence of the elder lot is concerned.
Professor Sabrina has made a very valid point regarding the absence of elders in most of these eating establishments and other venues. So for this, we'll have to look at this question and this point in a historical manner, because this very absence could be located to the fact that in the Northeast and in Assam particularly, the middle class developed much later than in the other places in India. That is why in many of these families that you see who are partying, these are the first generation of people who are visiting public places, who are visiting partying venues, who are visiting communal dining halls. So that is the reason why you do not find such the presence of elders in many of these venues. And I think this is a gap. I think she has brought it out very properly. This is a gap which explains a lot of moorless behavior that we are seeing amongst the youngsters.
Does this also
But I'm afraid I do not fully agree with Abhinav, because, I think even if you analyze it historically, it is more a matter of, cultural practice, because, even though the middle class developed later and everything, I agree. But, when it comes to presence of older people, older people are present in all sections of society. So basically, I think the problem comes in manifesting their presence. And, because when we talk about partying, we actually call it a phenomena which is restricted only to the youngsters. That is what I was trying to emphasize.
But the venues that you're talking about, where the youngsters are frequenting, but the elders are not there. Or you talked also about eating out, going to restaurants. So in many of these places, you'll have to understand this is the first generation of people who are going to these places. That is what I'm saying. And why I'm agreeing is that because this is the gap. This is the gap which is responsible for this disjuncture in the mode of our celebration.
Does this show that this is very much commercially motivated? Probably that's one of the reasons why the elder lot has not yet been fully a part of it, at least in this part of the country.
I think there is a cultural question associated with it, because if you see, the elders don't easily identify themselves with this New Year celebration. They will if you see the Maghu celebrations, 15 days later on, you'll find the old, the very old guys will be sitting together at the young lot. It's not that they don't identify, number one. Number two, there is also a sense of exposure. I guess this newly educated, or the millennials as we can put it, they're more exposed to it, and they try to more or less get in touch with this globalized phenomenon where everybody is celebrating something. And thirdly, I guess this is also a case of where we have an income which we call it disposable income. Like we have a cash we can spend on partying. Right before, I guess we didn't have it. We don't. It was not part of our budget to go, and we keep a part of our budget to celebrate. I guess we earlier 20 years back, partying did not matter. Budget was not there.
Correct.
Of course, priorities could have been different. We as a society are not alien to celebrations. As a country, we have a number of celebrations. We are good at what we do when it comes to celebrating. So let's not assume that we are not good at that. Say we have Bihu coming up, we have a lot of festivities, and it's not that it's regulated. It can continue throughout the night. You know, there are no timing restrictions. Things are smooth. There's no problem. Everybody is culturally involved. Are loudspeakers the main problem? Have loudspeakers with them brought the biggest nuisance of this century to us as a nation?
You know, putting it in the larger perspective, like I've mentioned, you know, briefly before, lawlessness has become accepted in this part of the country. So when it comes to loudspeakers, you know, if it in some particular countries, let me not name them, you will need proper permission to use them. And if you use them without permission, you will have to pay a penalty or you will be jailed. Now, what happens in this part of the country is that, you know, we are very casual that these are, you know, very, very, you know, these are problems of very lesser dimension. So let's not deal them. The authority has that kind of an attitude that let these people go, let's not take up these issues. But these issues need to be taken up. You know, they need to be taken up because only then we can come up with a civil society which lives in a particular order. You know, otherwise every time you let it go, the coming years, the future years are going to manifest more levels, more intensity of such kind of problems. So lawlessness, and like you said, you know, the loudspeaker thing, anybody can use a loudspeaker anywhere. You know, I'm taking a class in my university and people are going around on, you know, these tempos with loudspeakers making announcements about medicines. What is this? You know, we have to, you know, monitor these kind of things which are happening in our city. I just think the authorities need to buck up a little bit because, you know, for example, I will talk about something which bothers me. You go to any pharmacy, they will sell you a medicine without prescription. That is a very big problem because anybody can buy any kind of medicines and use it for whatever purpose. We do not have adequate lawful measures which need to be taken place in a city. We need people to be more proactive when it comes to law, and we need the authorities to be more proactive when it comes to execution of law. Otherwise, this will continue like this.
Ranjan, you want to add to it very quickly?
See, that's very true. But again, to control or to look at something or to manage, one side is law, strictness of the law, but then law and the media side. What do we do? What do we follow? What do we see? So, like, things have, yes, like what Sabrina was telling. Like regulation should be there, but again, young people, especially I'm talking, whenever they're young people, the first thing is that you make a law and I'll break the law. So it happens. So that's a very practical thing, and none of us are avoided. Maybe at one point of time I did the same thing. So being this thing as one practical thing, it affects in celebration time. Like people will go around, and you suppose even though there's a admission gives us strict norms. Okay, you cannot drive or you cannot drink and drive, and we'll find 1,000 other ways to round and round. But sometimes, yes, we are caught, sometimes we are not. But thing is that, yes, regulations, and then one thing I see in different because law is important for everything. And when it comes to community thing, like what the celebration in Bihu time, there are participation of, you know, seniors and elders, right? But yes, this some celebration, it's when it becomes personalized. And again, I see that more than me, someone else also supporting me or giving me indirect support to celebrate it. So once the cultural thing missed out,
are we trying to say community celebration is actually going forward the solution to a lot of chaos, menace?
Not only, but participation of community, participation of everyone, civil society.
Because there is some sort of, or at least till now, there is some sort of sanity when you know, the celebrations are mass celebrations. An entire community is involved.
And interestingly, just 1 second. There is a class divide in this celebration, New Year celebration. Like people, as you have mentioned earlier, people with higher amount of money will go to these big parties. People, there will be certain people who cannot go to restaurants and enjoy. People who cannot do that at home or make small groups will sit together. There is a classification. Second, the idea of what I'd say, the idea of nuisance, a civic sense, that we have to indeed cultivate this idea that nuisance is a big issue. Right now, this comes in a very lower down in a ladder in a law and order situation. The nuisance is not a big deal. Somebody is doing, let it go over. But as long, today this might be a big question, but after 10 years down the line, public nuisance will become in such a way that there will be huge ruckus and a lot of physical assaults might happen because of this. And it's already happening. Somebody is doing a loudspeaker, somebody else is coming and breaking it down. It has happened already. Yeah.
I think...
So,
Yeah. I just a very small point I want to make. Guwahati being the cultural, social and political hub of the region has people from different parts of the northeast coming in. So because different people are coming in from different parts of the region, so that is why sometimes we see that different kinds of problems manifest, because it is not a homogeneous population, it is a heterogeneous population, it is a multicultural population.
Absolutely.
And different kinds of practices are accepted for different communities.
And that's a challenge almost every big city in this country faces.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, coming back to the thing, Brigu Talukdar here was telling just a moment ago that there are a lot of barriers, class difference in celebrations. Community celebrations bridges that gap. So that is probably
you can say
one
that,
thing.
but at the same time, it would be also naive on our part to pin all our hopes on community celebrations, because as we have pointed out, we have talked about the case of Diwali celebrations, we have talked about the case of Durga Puja celebrations. Are they not community celebrations?
Absolutely.
I think what is more essential is to cultivate appropriate value systems, to cultivate a basic respect for the law, and also to sensitize people that transgressions of laws and irresponsible behavior would also lead to penalties being imposed. They cannot just get away scot-free by transgressing laws. I think it's about cultivating the appropriate value systems, which is a much more stable solution than just making a cultural relativist solution that certain forms of behavior or celebrations are good and certain forms are bad.
But then again, there have been states in the Northeast, governments in the Northeast, government initiatives. You cannot you cannot expect the government to get involved in everything. But we have had states in the Northeast where state governments have sponsored community celebrations. Like in the case in Shillong, the state government would organize a massive New Year kind of celebrations in the polo grounds. They will get a band, invite a band from outside to perform, local artists performing. It's a grand, everybody is heading to polo grounds on the New Eve. And that has become a ritual over the years, which has kind of brought the people together. The tourists can come, feel the culture, and they have utilized this. Meghalaya, as you all know, it's a Christian-dominated state where from the Christmas celebrations, the celebration starts and it continues till New Year, like you see in the West. And they have capitalized on it as far as the tourism is concerned, and it's working wonders. So even the state definitely has a role to play, not just in policing, not just in regulating, but also in bringing the community together. Your thoughts?
Definitely. But Navaran, having said that, having accepted what you said, I also think that the fact that Shillong is a much more homogeneous state than Assam has a role to play in this particular factor, because state-sponsored celebrations are welcome, because but like you said, majority of the population is Christian, so they identify with the way it has been organized, and that is why they participate. But like I've been saying, Guwahati is a place which is home to so many different people, from so many different backgrounds. I do not know if such an initiative will actually draw as much response as it is drawing in Meghalaya, as it is drawing in Shillong. And I also think that we cannot expect the people to come together only in one type of celebration, be it community celebration or something else. But I just think that, like Abhinav said, a kind of awareness, social consciousness, community consciousness, civic sense, these I think are potential solutions to the problem that we are discussing today. Because somebody who intends to create a ruckus will create a ruckus even in a state-sponsored celebration. So I think monitoring, like I've already emphasized before, and the awareness that, you cannot afford to be irresponsible, and that if you're irresponsible, that will draw serious consequences. That is important for the people to understand.
In a country like India, what is the short-term solution for creating awareness? Is there any? Are there none?
I think the short-term solution is that the law has to make a point that it is not easy to transgress it every time. I think that is the singular point that I would like to emphasize. In India, even when we flout traffic norms, why is it? Because there is an incentive to break laws, because if you can break the law, you'd reach your place of destination quite soon. And if you do not break the law, you'd be stuck in traffic jam. But the person who has transgressed laws, there is no penalty that is imposed. He can easily get away with it. So I think that is the immediate solution to make our legal procedures more foolproof. I think
a very small point I would like to add here is that you know, we had started this discussion talking about loud partying and these, you know, these massive costly parties which are being organized. The fact which comes to my mind when I talk about these things, you know, people are trying to patronize and develop a culture that if you are not partying on New Year's, you are not doing anything.
Exactly.
So basically, if you're not partying, what are you doing? So, you know, we need to develop these kind of alternative, cultures where you can be spending a quiet evening at home with your family, and that can be fun enough. And you cannot ask people questions that where are you partying? If not, why are you not partying? That is not a question. Why are you not partying? Because, you know, different forms of enjoyment can be different for different kinds of people. We cannot pin one kind of enjoyment as, you know, a homogeneous kind of enjoyment which you have to indulge, because I think that is a very, very important area from where these kind of problems stem, because we expect people to be partying. That is why everybody tends to arrange at their level whatever they can, and then these kind of problems arise.
Of course, I would like to draw,
That's right.
Yeah. I'd like to draw a point here. You know, surprisingly, the cases of drunk driving has gone down this year, as per the statistics, than the previous years. Okay.
So, just to add on, one good thing what I have seen, even 31st night I'm telling, there are a lot of checkpoints this time.
Yeah, that's
the good thing. I appreciate the police thing, because I was also coming from one place, and in not only one or two places. So there are, so somewhere there's a positive sign. Maybe someone, many people had a fear that yes, and they were with breath analyzer, so you cannot run away. So that one good thing that we must appreciate. So that might be one cause. There might be other, but this I have seen personally in many places. City police, as they have taken a very seriously. They have taken this point. They put police personnel in different places. So somewhere that worked this time.
Policing does work. There's no denying to that, but also slowly, as we had discussed earlier in the debate, that New Year celebrations are still a pretty new thing to this country. Probably it started a couple of decades ago, the way it is, or a decade and a half ago. So slowly, as it seeps in, the culture seeps in, are we also becoming a little bit more responsible? Could that also be the cause of, dipping in slight dip in the numbers of cases than we see in the previous years?
Look, it's really difficult to forecast into the future, but what happens is that gradually when you become acclimatized with certain forms of behavior, you also acquire the social moves which are required for practicing those forms of behaviors, or for practicing those forms of celebrations. So I think that is an optimistic sign if it happens exactly like you have said. But again, I'll keep on stressing that this very essence of the celebration that we are talking about, that itself is problematic, because that is, at the end of the day, it is rooted in a materialist culture, it is rooted in attitudes of narcissism, it is rooted in relations of capital. So I think that needs to change, and that can only change not only through policing, but by counterposing an alternate set of traditions and alternate value systems which are associated with celebrations. We'll have to make the people say that the hegemonical trend of celebrations is not the singular way that we celebrate. I think that is the solution. There lies the solution.
Bhrigu Talukdar, Dr. Iqbal, do you see things changing slowly, or we have to face these kind of situations at least for the next decade or so? What do you think? Can you predict for the next 5 years at least?
I'm not an astrologist, so can't. See,
do you see some sense of sanity seeping in gradually, at least over the time, if you compare the last 5 years and going forward?
So it's also the case of how a society adapts. The certain sort of behavior has come in. Point A, the point of entry has been made. It will create that sort of a ferment in a society that some will behave in a certain way and others will not. And when the cons will start outweighing the pros, when this the nuisance quotient will be greater than the celebration quotient, then slowly the people will also start checking themselves, or the society as a whole will come together. It will happen naturally. And at the second time, once this linkage between, this consumerist promotional culture of New Year and the idea of New Year, cultural idea of a New Year, starting something new, as long as it is together, it will remain for some time. And once this tethering breaks, or at least weakened, we can say that that inroads will be made where these sorts of behavior will be seen as an aberration rather than a normal. And the future is where India as a society will adapt to it, because society adapts to it in the end. Whether it's law, whether it's even this discussion or even this civic sense, everything will come together.
Absolutely. Last words from you, Dr. Iqbal.
You know, Navarun, I think it's rather a paradox because, you know, though we know that New Year parties can become a nuisance with the problems that it causes that we've been discussing all over. But I just think that, you know, given the capitalist and the consumerist culture that we are living in, we have become victims because given the kind of lives we are leading, alienation, anarchy, these issues have become very common. And we as individuals, we also seek out opportunities where we can indulge in a little bit of fun, have a little bit of, you know, relaxation and chilling time.
Absolutely.
So what happens is that when we are talking about relaxation and chilling, sometimes some other people's relaxation and chilling can become a nuisance for others. So I think it's a very big paradox, and I think it's not easy to come to a closure point as far as this problem is concerned. But I would like to be optimistic, and I would hope that people would develop a little more sensitiveness towards other people's needs and would try their best not to break public order while having their share of fun, which I think is quite possible.
Very quickly, last words, very quickly. We're really short of time.
I think, like Phrigu said, not astrologer, but I said next few years we might be a little bit more problematic because we are learning coping. But let us be also positive.
He believes the next few years may be more problematic. Well, I'm optimistic. Of course, we have the right to celebrate. Don't make too much noise. Don't disturb your neighbors. Spare a thought for everybody. Have fun. Nobody's stopping you. On that note, we'll take your leave today. Do join us again for another episode of Beyond the Bites next week.